Understanding networking is a circular for any inspiring hacker. In many situations, you will be hacking something over a network, and a good hacker needs to know how to connect to and interact with that network. For example, you may need to connect to a computer with your internet protocol address hidden from Viv, or you may need to redirect a target's domain name system DNS queries to your system. These kinds of tasks are relatively simple but require a little Linux network know-how. So this lecture shows you some essential Linux tools for analyzing and managing networks during your network hacking adventures. So analyzing networks with ifconfig here, ifconfig here, as you can see here. So actually, I will stop my network here for now. As you can see here, for more understanding here. So the ifconfig command is one of the most basic tools for examining and interacting with active network interfaces. You can use it to query your active network connections by simply entering ifconfig in the terminal. Try it yourself and you should see output like similar to this. If not, this means you have more Ethernet adapters, or you have VLAN adapters as well. There's no problem. It's a usual thing. So as you can see here, the ifconfig command shows some useful information about the active network interfaces on the system. At the top of the output is the name of the first detected interface, AT-0, and which is so short for Ethernet 0 here. This means Ethernet 0. So Linux start counting at 0 rather than 1 as some programming languages. Actually, a wide range of programming languages. So this is the first wired network connection. So this means 0. So if there were a more wired Ethernet interface, they will show up in the output using the same format here, like that ATH1 or ATH2, like that, or ATH3. So, and so on. So the type of network being used, Ethernet here, is listed next, followed by hardware address and an address. So this is the globally unique address and stamped on every piece of network hardware. In this case, the network interface card, NIC, usually referred to as the Media Access Control, MAC. As you can see here, this is the MAC address of my Ethernet 0 adapter. So this MAC address can be changeable, but it's usually unique for every network interface controller. So the second line contains information on the IP address currently assigned to the that network interface. In this case, 198 to 168, 58 and 129 here. And we have the broadcast here as well, broadcast IP address, which is the address used to send out information to all IPs on the subnet. Finally, we have network mask, netmask here, which is used to determine what part of the IP address is connected to the local network. You will also find more technical information in this section of the output, but it's beyond the scope of the Linux networking basics section. Here, you will learn later about this. So the next section of the output shows another network connection called LOW. So which is short of the loopback here address, and is sometimes called localhost. This is special software address that connects to your own system. Software and services not running on your system can't use it. You will use law to test something on your system, such as your own web server. So the localhost is generally represented with IP address 128.0.0.1, as you can see here. So this is not commented because it will not show anything output here. So the third section of our interface, if you're using a notebook and you have a WLAN adapter, wireless adapter, this will appear you only if you have a wireless adapter, interface or adapter. But in my case, I have not wireless adapter because this is the virtual machine here I'm using. And if you install to your laptop computer here, you will see like that VLAN 0 here. So we can check wireless network devices with IWconfig. If you have a wireless adapter, you can use the IWconfig command to gather circular information for wireless hacking, such as the adapter's IP address here. Let me check. So, such as the wireless adapter IP address here, its MAC address, what mode it's in, and more. So the information you can glean from this command is particularly important when you are using wireless hacking tools like AirCrackNG here, like that. So using the terminal, now let's look at some wireless devices with EWconfig here. EWconfig. As you can see here, we have no wireless extensions. So the output here tells us that the only network interface with wireless extension is VLAN 0 if you have VLAN 0, but in my case I have not because it's a virtual machine. We can change network information as well. So being able to change your IP address and other network information is a useful skill because it will help you access other networks while appearing as a trusted device on these networks. For example, in a denial of service DOS attack, you can spoof your IP so that the attack appears to come from another source, thus helping you evade IP capture during forensic analysis. So this is the relatively simple tasks in Linux, and it's done with the ifconfig command. Changing your IP address. To change your IP address, enter ifconfig followed by the interface you want to reassign and the new IP address you want to assign to the interface. So in my case, for example, to assign IP address, some IP address to 80*0 here, and then enter your IP address 128. What was our first IP address here? As you can see, our default IP address is 129. Let's change it to 115 here. And 58 120 actually 115 here. As you can see, operation is not confirmed. For doing this, sudo here, kali and password. As you can see here, Linux will not return anything to us. When you do this correctly, Linux will simply return the command prompt and say nothing. So this is a good thing here. And then you can again check your network connections with ifconfig here, and you should see see that your IP address has changed to new IP address. As you can see here, our IP address is last number was 129, and this is now 115 here. So you can also change your network masks, net masks, and broadcast address with ifconfig command. For instance, if you want to assign the same AT#0 interface with net masks 255.255.0.0 and the broadcast address to 192.186 and 0.1.255, then you should type this command in your terminal. For example, config, and let's assign our Ethernet adapter here, and the first our IP address here, 120 168 101.115 or 230 point, for example. This is just ordinary round number. 115 here. We should use sudo for this command, and actually let's change the netmask as well here. Netmask 255.255.0.0. As you can see here, we have deleted the last 255 part of from our command. You will learn all about this, what is netmasks and what is broadcast. I will just show you how to use that. And broadcast here 192.168.1.255. As you can see here, we changed our IP address. Once again, if you done correctly, everything correct, Linux responds with a new command prompt here. So now enter ifconfig command again to verify that each of the parameters has been changed accordingly. Here, as you can see here, we changed all of them. So in Linux, we can swap the IP address as well. Actually, in next lecture we will do it, so I'm waiting you in next lecture. You can also use ifconfig to change your MAC address or hardware address here. Hardware, they are the same thing here. Here like that. So the MAC address is globally unique and is often used as a security measure to keep hackers out of the network or to trace them. Changing your MAC address to swap different MAC address is almost trivial and neutralizing to security measures. It's a very useful technique for bypassing network access controls. To spoof your MAC address, simply use the ifconfig command. Commands here. Ifconfig commands down option to take down the interface AT0 in this case. AT0 down here. We should use with sudo command, and then enter the ifconfig command sudo ifconfig AT0 hardware HW ether. So then enter the ifconfig command. So hardware for w for hardware and ether for Ethernet, and the new spot enter the new spot MAC address. So for example 0.00011223344 and 55 here, and then finally bring the interface back up with the up option for the change to take the place. For example, if config if config eth-0 up, we should use with sudo command for root rights. And now when you check your new settings with ifconfig, you will see your new MAC address here. Actually, what was our old address here? Here, as you can see here, we changed our route, internet IP address, netmask, broadcast, and Ethernet as well here. So we can assign new IP address from the DHCP server. So Linux has a dynamic host configuration protocol server that runs on daemon, a process that runs in the background. So called DHCPD here. Or the DHCP daemon. So the DHCP server assigns IP address to all the systems on the subnet and keeps log files of which IP address is allocated to which machine here. So usually to connect this interface from a line, you must have a DHCP assigned IP. So we will DHCP client here, as you can see here. Now, therefore, after setting a static IP address, you must return and get a new DHCP assigned IP address. To do this, you can always reboot your system, reboot here, but I will not reboot here. And but I will show you how to retrieve a new DHCP without having to shut your system down and restart it. So to request an IP address from DHCP, simply call the DHCP server with command DHClient, followed by the interface you want the address assigned to. So different Linux distributions use the different DHCP clients, but Kali is built on a Debian, which uses DHCP client. Therefore, you can assign new address like this, eth0. We have to use sudo command as well here. As you can see here, we are waiting for it. So the DHCP client, DH client command sends a DHCP discover request from the network interface specified here, and eth0, of course, in this case, it receives the offer DHCP offer from the DHCP server. This is the IP address in this case, and confirms the IP assignment to it. So we have played with our Ethernet addresses and all of our netmasks here, so I will not try this here. But you get the idea, of course. Let's manipulate the domain name system here. For example, for this command here, so hackers can find a treasure trove of information on a target on its domain name system, DNS. So in next lecture, you will learn you will learn and practically manipulate the domain name system in Linux. So I'm waiting you in next lecture. In this lecture, you will manipulate the domain name system DNS. Hackers can find a treasure trove of information on a target in its domain name system, DNS. So DNS is a critical component of the internet. So, and also it's designed to translate domain names to IP addresses. So a hacker can use it to garner information on the target. DNS is a service that translates a domain name, like for example, let's open web browser and I will, for example, google.com to appropriate IP address. So I will show you an illustration of DNS here, .com here. Actually, our internet is disconnected because I plug out our network adapter here, and I will fix it now here. As you can see, DuckDuckGo. We will go DuckDuckGo here, and I will search here DNS, and I want to show you an illustration here for better understanding. So actually, DNS work. Here, as you can see here, let me open here. So this is then our possible attacks here. So first I want to talk about Google here, for example. DNS is a service that translates a domain name, for example, like google.com, to IP address. So the way your system knows how to get to do it, so without DNS, we will all have to remember thousands of IP addresses like that. For example, in Google, it might be google.com, for example, it might be 106 here, 2.8582 here, and 132, for example. So if without DNS, you will remember all of these IP addresses without these logically alphabet numbers. So DNS converts your domain name to IP address. So and one of the most useful commands for the aspiring hacker is a dig. So which offers a way to gather DNS information about the target domain. So the stored DNS information can be a key piece of early reconnaissance to obtain before attacking. So this information could include the IP address of the target's name server, so the server that translates the target's name to an IP address, so the target's email server, and potentially any subdomains and IP addresses. For instance, let's open our terminal here and enter dig, for example, google.com. Here, as you can see here, and we got information from Google here, as you can see here. So here also notice, as you can see here, we have additional section here. Dig reveals the IP address here, IP address of the DNS server for serving google.com. So you can also use the dig command to get information on email servers connected to a domain by adding MX option. So MX is a short for mail exchange server. As you can see here, we get so much information about that. And answer section here, this is the Google's IP address. For example, let's get MX here, write MX here, and we will get this information here. So what is this? This is the information is critical for attacks on email systems. So for example, info on the google.com email servers is shown in the authority sections here, as you can see here. So the most common Linux DNS server is the Berkeley Internet Name Domain, BIND. So in some cases, Linux users will refer DNS as BIND. But don't get be confused. So DNS and BIND both map individual domain names to IP addresses. We can change our DNS server as well. So in some cases, you may want to use another DNS server. So to do so, you will edit a plain text file named here cat etc resolve.conf here. Conf here, as you can see here. This is our this is just a small file. As you can see here, we read it with cat command here, cat program. So let's open it with leafpad. Actually, it's not mousepad, right? Mousepad etc resolve.conf here. So here you will see that, as you can see here, there is a 4 lines. So this is the read only. As you can see here, for writing, we have to use sudo command and enter your Kali password. And as you can see here, this is the writable now. So because with our current user, we cannot edit system files, but I used sudo here. So when upon the resolve configuration file, the etc directory in my specified graphical text editor is mousepad here. So as you can see on line 3 here, my name server is set to a local DNS server 192.168.58.2, and that works fine. But this, as you can see here, we can use our domains. For example, if I want to go to Facebook, facebook.com, it works here. Or if I want to go to Wikipedia here, it works here too, as you can see here. But if I want to change my DNS server, we can add or replace with this inside this file here. So Google's public DNS server is 8.8.8.8. So I will add this DNS here, but firstly I want to show you here Google, actually DuckDuckGo here, and Google DNS here. I will add Google DNS to my file here, Google DNS here. I want to show you what is Google DNS. As you can see here, 8.8.8.8 here. As you can see here, this is the Google's DNS. So we can use Cloudflare's DNS as well here, but in this case I will use Google's DNS. As you can see here, there is so much DNS servers here. Cloudflare DNS is 1.1.1.1, but Google is 8.8.8.8. So let's change this to 8.8.8.8 here, and I will add this line to here and just save the file. So however, you can also achieve the same result exclusively from the command line by entering here echo here name server 8.8.8.8 and show your resolve conf here. This we will use sudo writes because we cannot write any files here. So I want let's check our mousepad. As you can see here, we changed it. So if you open the resolve configuration file now, you should see that it points DNS request to Google DNS server rather than your local DNS server to resolve. Your system will now go out to the Google public DNS server to resolve domain names to IP addresses. This can mean domain names take a little longer to resolve, probably milliseconds, therefore to maintain speed, but to keep the option of using the public server, you might want to retrain the local DNS server in the resolve configuration file and follow it with the public DNS server. The operating system queries each DNS server listed in order. The order it appears in ATZ resolve configuration file. So the system will only refer to the public DNS server if the domain name can't found in the local DNS server. A special file on your system called the hosts file also performs a domain name IP address translation. The hosts file located at the here cat etc hosts here. And kind of as with DNS, you can use it to specify your own IP address domain name mapping. In other words, you can determine which IP address your browser goes to when you enter www.microsoft.com or any another domain into the browser rather than let the DNS server decide here. As a hacker, this can be useful for hijacking a TCP connection on your local area network to direct traffic to a malicious web server with a tool such as DNS spoof here, which we will use these tools later on this lecture course actually. So you will learn all about these tools as well. So from the command line, type the mouse pad here and etc hosts. Actually, it's, as you can see, this is read only, and I will change. I will use sudo and type my password, Kali password here. As you can see here, we open the file and we can edit our file now. So by default, the host file contains only mapping for your local host at 127.0.0.1 and your system's host name, in this case Kali, and 127.0.1.1. But you can add any IP address mapped to any domain you like. As an example of how this might be used, you could map here, for example, bankofamerica.com to your local website. For example, this is just an example. I will not do anything. So, for example, 128.0.0.1, and for example, let's do it www.bankofamerica.com here. And now let's open a browser here and bankofamerica.com. As you can see here, we are getting same result as we did in localhost here. For example, 124 here. As you can see here, we're getting the same result here. But if we delete this bank here. Oops. And save this here. This will work here. As you can see here, we are getting the official website of it. So I just changed our DNS and in our Kali machine, so it will work only in my operating system. So make certain you press tab between the IP address and the domain name, not the space bar here. So as you get more involved in your hacking endeavors and learn about tools like DNS spoof and EtherCap, you will be able to use host file to direct any traffic on your LAN that visits to, for example, google.com or bankofamerica.com here to your web server at a localhost or just a LAN web server that you can create it for phishing. So this is pretty easy, right? So any hacker needs some basic Linux networking skills to connect, analyze, and manage networks. As you progress, these skills will become more and more useful for doing reconnaissance, spoofing, and connecting to target systems.